Hey, it's Zane, welcome back. Hope you're doing great wherever you may be. Thanks for tuning in once again. I'm actually coming to you today from Bali, Indonesia. I'm just up here for about 10 days having a break together with my wife, and we're in an area of Bali, down the southern section of Bali, called Bingan. It's a quite tranquil little area, a lot of up and coming development in this area. It's near a place called Uluwatu, which is quite widely known, but really enjoying the break here and loving it. Beautiful beaches around this part of Bali, so having a great time. But I wanted to get this video to you, and I wanted to address a question today that came up in the comments section of a recent video, which I thought was a really good question. I want to do my best to answer it for you today because it is quite a common question. And the question was, is there a price at which I would no longer consider buying Bitcoin? Is there a price at which it would no longer make sense to stack sats, to stack Satoshis? And I think it's a fair question because we can see right now that the Bitcoin price has trended through 100,000 US dollars, which is, over 160,000 Australian dollars. And I know that there's a general sentiment out there from particularly people who are new to this space, who kind of say to themselves, even subconsciously, that it might not be something front of mind, but there's this nagging voice in the back of our heads that says, is Bitcoin too expensive right now? Have I missed the boat? Is it going to correct 15, 20, 25%? And what will that mean? And this is, like I said, it's a natural state of mind for one to be in who's looking at Bitcoin right now. But my firm personal opinion of this, my firm belief, is that if you're thinking that way, you haven't done enough work on Bitcoin. And the reason I say that is because we have to keep coming back to the fact that Bitcoin is the first and the only fixed, finite monetary instrument that humanity has ever seen. It is absolutely scarce. Now, what does that mean? What it means is that over time, now notice that I'm saying over time, I'm not talking about in 6 weeks, 6 months. I'm talking about over a 4-year cycle and beyond, which is how we need to look at Bitcoin. Over time, what we always see with Bitcoin, you can go back to 2009 when the first block of Bitcoin, known as the Genesis block, was released in January 2009. And you can go and you can look at a Bitcoin price chart from there till now. And what you see is that the price chart is on a very clear trajectory of up and to the right forever. And so why is that? Well, the reason for that is because it's a finite asset, it is always going to go up and to the right, because when you price it in an infinite asset, which is what the US dollar is and the Australian dollar is and the euro is, when you price it in that, or denominate it in that infinite asset, there's only one way that the price of Bitcoin can go forever, and that is up, because a finite asset will always absorb energy from an infinite asset. And this is why, scarce, desirable real estate in blue chip locations such as, beachfront property or Sydney Harbour property, there's only so much of that stuff. And this is why the price of that real estate, when priced in the US dollar, Australian dollar, any fiat currency, will always go up and to the right forever. Will it have pullbacks of 10, 20% over a market cycle? Absolutely. Any asset can do that. And it's the same with Bitcoin. And the reason why a lot of people get spooked or scared when they look at Bitcoin, because they say, well, it's just too volatile. They don't realize that Bitcoin is also the only asset on earth that trades 24/7, 365. And so you can dispose of your Bitcoin, anybody can dispose of their Bitcoin at midnight on a Saturday night, if they want to do that, if there's a reason they need to divest some to clear some debt, or something happens in their life that they need to put their hands on some cash quickly. And that doesn't apply to any other asset. And so when you have an asset that is as liquid as Bitcoin is, you're always going to have more volatility. But this is kind of my roundabout way of answering this question, and just getting you to really zone back in on what this asset is. Because when you understand what this asset is, and the fact that they cannot make any more Bitcoin, no matter who says what, even the most powerful country on earth that is indicated that they want to acquire 1 million Bitcoin and put it on their treasury, being the US government, even if they're able to do that, they're not going to be able to change the Bitcoin protocol. They're not going to be able to create any more Bitcoin. I mean, the US government is going to have its work cut out for it to actually acquire that much Bitcoin, because there's not that much Bitcoin available. And we know that 95 to 98% of it actually has already been mined, and so it's already in the market. And so we're approaching a time now where we're going to have an absolute supply shock on Bitcoin. You won't be able to actually go to an exchange and just buy it like you can now. And so all of this is where we're at right now. And this is why I keep saying, this is a crossroads moment in history where there's going to be a significant wealth transfer, the likes of which we've never seen, certainly in my lifetime, since 1970. Well, I was born in 72, but we know in 1971 that the US broke the gold promise. The gold standard was severed, and since that time, not only the US dollar, but every other currency in the world has not been backed by gold. It's been essentially backed by nothing other than the faith that we have in the central bank and the governments of the day. And that's the only thing that the Australian dollar or the US dollar or the euro or any of those currencies are actually backed by, just the faith that you and I have in them. And so this is all changing now. People are now starting to have less trust in the establishment, less trust in the system, less trust in banking, less trust in their financial planner, yes, less trust in the government. People's tolerance for rule changes and disruption to their life, I'm sure you would agree, our tolerance is becoming less and less. And I know most people, they'll just go with the flow and they'll stay on to the bitter end. And even though there's these red flags everywhere of how things are becoming more and more centralized and more socialist and more controlling, most people will still stay asleep at the wheel until it really starts to impact their life in a significant way. And only then will most people wake up. I do get that. But if you're watching this video, then you're already wide awake. You can already see the signs, because there's only one reason to be involved in Bitcoin, and it's not number go up. It's because we need to start protecting and preserving a meaningful part of our financial life, diversifying a meaningful part of our financial life into this decentralized asset, because it is completely permissionless, it is completely portable, it is globally recognized, it is the most liquid asset on earth. There's no counterparty risk. It is the separation of money from state. You can take your wealth with you at any time, at the drop of a hat, if you have access to your 12 or 24 word seed phrase memorized in your head, or stored somewhere that you can just download an app and have access to your Bitcoin anywhere in the world at any time. I mean, it is a transformative asset. And so, I hope that I'm kind of in a roundabout way answering this question, because there's no really straightforward answer to it, other than to realize that until you really get what Bitcoin is, and the fact that it's not going anywhere, it cannot go to zero. Do you think that it could go to zero, or the US government would essentially have endorsed it, or BlackRock would be buying it, or MicroStrategy would be continuing to acquire it with Michael Saylor? Do you think that would all be happening if Bitcoin had any chance of going to zero. It is way too decentralized now. The longer that time goes on, the more decentralized and secure the Bitcoin network becomes. Now, could there have been a time 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, where Bitcoin could have failed? Yes, it could have, because over time, as more and more nodes have entered the network and are authenticating and driving the consensus protocol of Bitcoin, it is becoming more and more decentralized. But there was a time where we didn't have that many computer nodes working together to secure the network, but now we do. It is just too decentralized now. And so, you know, this is the thing we have to understand, is that, you know, as time goes on, Bitcoin is going to completely transform the financial system. It actually is already doing that. And you'll only realize that if you start pricing assets around you, your home, for example, in Bitcoin. I mean, if you live in a house now that you own, and you go back and you price that home when you bought it, if it was in the last 15 years, if you priced that home in Bitcoin at the price that it was when you bought it, and you don't even have to go back 15 years, you can go back 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, and price your home that you live in Bitcoin, back then. And it's easy to look up what the Bitcoin price was back then. You can just put that into Google and it'll come up on the such and such a date. And even though you think that the price of your house has gone up in real terms, because you're pricing it in Australian dollars or in US dollars, when you start pricing it in the hardest form of money that we've ever seen, which is Bitcoin, what you actually see is that the price of your home is falling quite rapidly. Just as an example, 2016, I think the median house price in Australia was probably around about $700,000, something like that. And at the time, it would have been about 600 to 650 Bitcoin to actually buy that house. Whereas today, the median house price in Australia is something like $1.1 million. So even though it's gone up, let's say it's doubled in Australian dollar terms, the price to buy that home today is, 5 or 6 Bitcoin. And so we can see that the price of that piece of real estate has actually fallen by about 100x over the past decade, even though we think it's gone up because we're pricing it in Australian dollars, and we say, hey, yeah, the price of our home has doubled in 10 years. But in reality, when you price it in Bitcoin, you see that it's fallen by about 100 times. And this is the light bulb moment. This is where we are now. And so the more that we start realizing what Bitcoin is, the more conviction we develop to continue to allocate any spare resources that we have to Bitcoin. And this is not financial advice. I can't advise you financially. That's not what I am. And there are professionals out there who will challenge you in terms of your decision making. Unfortunately, the financial planning industry, they can't advise you on Bitcoin because it's not part of the approved products list. In other words, they don't have any professional indemnity on Bitcoin, so they won't recommend it. But the sad part about that is that they are shortchanging their clients, in the sense that everybody's in these assets that are performing at 8 to 10% a year, which not even close to keeping up with the true rate of inflation, which is more around 14 to 15% when you take into account currency debasement, money printing. And this is what we call the hurdle rate. So unless you've got assets that are delivering more than that 13 to 15% in performance, then essentially you're going backwards. And so this is where we are now. And unfortunately, all the other traditional asset classes, they're only delivering that 8 to 10%. And here Bitcoin is delivering 50 to 60%. And, and there's very wealthy people, very smart people who still don't realize what Bitcoin is and still think that it's a scam, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's going to zero, it's going to fail. Don't want to even tune into trying to understand what it is. And unfortunately, these people have all of their assets parked in a system that is completely centralized. And so they are at the whim of any policy changes that take place. All of their assets are absolutely exposed, in my opinion. And so this is why Bitcoin exists, because we've never had an asset that cannot be changed. You know, it's not controlled by a handful of people who make decisions that impact everybody else's financial lives. And this is why Bitcoin was created on the back of a crisis moment known as the Great Financial Crisis of 2008. You think it was by accident that Bitcoin was released to the world, you know, when there was so much fraud and corruption and disruption in the financial system that took place in that moment, that had a ripple effect all around the world, and the elites got bailed out and everybody else got left holding the bag. There's a reason why Bitcoin came out on the back of that, and we have to keep realizing what this is and why it was created and how it has evolved over the past 16 years to be where it is today. And so no, there's not a price that I would ever stop acquiring Bitcoin unless I simply had no more savings, income, or capital to deploy. And that's how I feel about it. Doesn't mean that you have to feel that way. I think it's good to still have some diversification in your life. I mean, I still have real estate assets. They provide utility for me and my family, and for that reason, you know, I don't intend disposing of them in a hurry. But I do know people who have made decisions to dispose of their family home to deploy all of their capital into Bitcoin. In fact, one Australian gentleman by the name of Peter Dunworth, he's very vocal about this on his podcast. You know, it's not a secret. He says, you know, I recently sold our family home and we're all in on Bitcoin. And so, you know, everybody's situation is different, circumstances are different, their goals are different, where they're at in their life is different. But when it comes to Bitcoin and really parking a meaningful part of your life into this hedge asset, when we consider everything that's going on in the world, I just think you need to really keep coming back to first principles and understanding that this asset was created for a reason. And you know, if you think the price has run away from you, you haven't done enough work on Bitcoin. If you're worried because you put some money into Bitcoin and the price of it has fallen by 10, 20, 25%, and that's stopping you from buying more because Bitcoin is at a discount now, then if you're not thinking that way, it means you haven't done enough work on Bitcoin. I mean, I think back to when I first got started in Bitcoin. I think after the first stack that I purchased, about, you know, 2-3 weeks later, the price had fallen by about 25%. But because I'd done the foundational work on Bitcoin, I still had so much to learn. But because I'd done the foundational work, I just used it as an opportunity to acquire more because I understood what this asset is. So I hope you got something from that today. I could keep going, but I'm going to leave it at that. One thing I will say though is, when it comes to understanding the magnitude of this asset, I just want to wrap up with this. There was an interview with Jeff Booth, and if you haven't listened to any interviews with Jeff Booth, I'd highly encourage you to get onto YouTube. All you need to do is put in Jeff Booth, Bitcoin, and you're going to get a whole stack of long form interviews that he's done in recent times. And he did an interview very recently where he was asked what the true inherent value of Bitcoin is in his eyes. And remember, Jeff Booth is the guy who keeps referring to Bitcoin as the world's first truly global free market, the only free market that humanity has ever seen, meaning that it is always going to reprice everything. Everything essentially is going to go to zero when priced in Bitcoin, because we've never had a true global free market. But anyway, Jeff was asked what the value of Bitcoin is, the true inherent value, and what it should be in today's dollars. And he bluntly said $43 million. And the way he got to that figure was by mentioning that the total addressable market for assets worldwide is about $900 trillion when you take into account property, stocks, bonds, shares, currencies, gold, silver, etc. fine art, collectibles. When you add all of that together, that pool of assets or store of value that people utilize to park their savings or their long-term economic energy is about 900 trillion. And we know that Bitcoin has a hard cap of 21 million, and there'll never be any more Bitcoin. And so when you take 900 trillion and you divide it by 21 million, you get around about 43 million. And so, really the conclusion to this is that Jeff is of the firm belief that because Bitcoin is the world's first only true global free market, it is just going to continue to absorb all of the financial energy out of all of the other asset classes. And that's what we're going to see over time. So I'll leave you to ponder that thought. I'm still digesting that, but I'd encourage you to listen to Jeff Booth. The more you listen to him, the more you realize that this is the place to be. This is the future. We have an opportunity to opt out of a failing debt-based system that really is only on life support because they keep creating more debt. And you and I get to choose whether we want to keep playing that game or we want to start diversifying and moving our life towards this more honorable and truth-based system that cannot be messed with, and that is Bitcoin. So I'm going to leave it there today. I want to thank you for tuning in. Please share your comments in the comments section. Like, share, and subscribe. I'd appreciate it if you do that. And if you need to book a call with me, I've got several calls booked actually while I'm here in Bali. People are booking one-on-one Zoom calls with me, and I can help you in any area you need, whether you're looking to level up your direction when it comes to Bitcoin, look at the best self-custody solutions, just looking for some guidance from me in terms of the best places to buy Bitcoin on board. Maybe you're looking to set up a Bitcoin-friendly pension plan or retirement fund, and so I have somebody I recommend in Sydney who sets up SMSFs, so it can help you roll over your industry super fund into an SMSF so that you can buy Bitcoin, and you can also take it into self-custody, which is so important. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. This is Zane signing out. Have a great day. Bye for now.